To Dr. James Salisbury, there was a very good reason why his famous Salisbury steak looked like this and not this. He saw soldiers suffering from debilitating diseases during the Civil War and was determined to find a solution. In fact, nearly 2/3 or approximately 400,000 of the roughly 600,000 deaths were directly related to disease and not battle wounds themselves. His idea of a 100% all beef diet being touted as a cure-all seemed very similar to the concept of the modern day carnivore diet, or more specifically, the modern day lion diet. Although he saw great success treating patients with the Salisbury steak protocol, it wasn't his first try at a cure-all diet. Not only this, but there were some very key differences that made the Salisbury steak diet more effective, but less sustainable at the same time. Dr. James Salisbury, born in 1823, was a physician in the Army during the American Civil War. Here, he witnessed firsthand the devastating effects of disease. These mostly consisted of diseases affecting the gut, which is exactly why he began to experiment with different diets to find a solution. As he wrote in his book, The Relation of Alimentation and Disease, the grim list of so-called incurable diseases riveted my attention. I attained an entire conviction that they must be curable, since abnormal conditions could be established in previously healthy organisms. Their causation must be discoverable. Given this, it wasn't crazy to assume that diet would have a significant effect. The first diet he tested on the soldiers was a baked bean diet, consisting of only baked beans and coffee. He then did something very similar with oatmeal and coffee. The results? Well, they were catastrophic. Dr. Salisbury watched in horror as the soldiers' health began to rapidly deteriorate. Their limbs became paralyzed and their bodies weakened, as they also suffered from chronic gut issues, heart palpitations, and difficulty breathing. After these catastrophic results, Dr. Salisbury knew he needed to take a completely different approach, one that was easy on the gut and knew without a doubt that humans could tolerate. So what was fit for human consumption? Well, beef. The Salisbury steak wasn't just a food, it was a medicine. He designed it to be non-fermenting, perfect for those with compromised guts. The beef was scraped, chopped, and finally minced to a texture that made it easier for the intestines to absorb all of its nutrients without triggering inflammation. This sounds great, but there were some real major downsides and flaws to the original Salisbury steak method. See, in one scenario, you could effortlessly heal disease, shred fat, and optimize your health, but at the same time, you might feel fatigued, slow, and get sick of eating meat. The original Salisbury steak had a long list of benefits. People were able to rapidly reverse chronic illnesses like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and rheumatoid arthritis. What Dr. Salisbury discovered here, what many people still don't understand, is that getting rid of fiber can actually drastically reduce inflammation, especially in people with chronic diseases. Most doctors and dietitians nowadays, although not all, will claim that fiber is a superfood, and that the main issue with an all-meat diet is its lack of fiber. But this is actually one of the main benefits. After all, fiber is actually completely indigestible by humans, and as many people may not know, fiber can actually act as an anti-nutrient. An anti-nutrient is a natural or synthetic compound that interferes with the body's absorption of nutrients. Insoluble fiber can bind to minerals like magnesium, potentially throwing your electrolytes out of balance, which is why it isn't so surprising that this study found that in people with idiopathic constipation, the elimination of fiber was 100% effective in 100% of the patients. This is very similar to what Dr. Salisbury noted hundreds of years before the study was done. But there were some major flaws in the way that Dr. Salisbury went about his way of eating. Although this diet was great for healing disease, some of the foundations in which he built this diet made it very unsustainable. And no, it wasn't the fact that they were just eating meat, but the specific way in which it was chosen. The biggest problem was that he wanted to prioritize lean cuts. He thought, just like the grizzle, fat would be harder to absorb and overload the system. But he was just plain wrong. Eating enough fat is actually one of the most important parts to making an all-meat diet sustainable. Given Dr. Salisbury's ideas were more based on experimentation rather than the first principles of human nutrition, it's not surprising that he got some things wrong. So a first principle is basically when you strip away all assumptions in an attempt to get down to the core truth or foundation. For human nutrition, this could look like forgetting about all of the experiments that may not always be able to be replicated, and looking at what we have eaten for the majority of our time here on this planet before disease became rampant. And what's great is that we now have stable isotope data, showing that humans have been eating mostly large ruminant animals for the majority of our time here on this planet. which is why it isn't so surprising that articles like this exist, which also point out many physiological factors that support this, like humans having the lowest stomach acid pH in the animal kingdom, which is in line with other carnivores. One of the main reasons why I'm able to sustain this while staying in great health and maintaining consistent energy levels is by prioritizing fat. But given in recent times that fat has been demonized, many butchers cut away most of the fat, meaning that it must be something to be attained rather than something that just comes along with your average cut of beef. In terms of macronutrients, I'm going to get about 70 to 80% of my calories from fat and the rest protein. So this is what aligns best with the entire macronutrient ratio if you were to eat an entire ruminant animal, like a cow for example. So although the original Salisbury steak was great for healing diseases like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, gout, and tuberculosis, it ended up not being sustainable for many due to its lack of fat content. The Salisbury steak has shifted from being one of the healthiest, most nutrient-dense foods on the planet to just another processed junk food. Now that it contains ingredients like breadcrumbs, flour, and soy in the gravy, it is straight far away from being a health food that is easy on the gut. But it's not all bad news since the original Salisbury steak is making a comeback. The Lion Diet, which is a strict version of the carnivore diet, is essentially what the Salisbury steak protocol was, but with a bit more fat. Michaela Fuller, who assisted in the surge of its popularity, has been able to heal many of her lifelong health issues like juvenile rheumatoid arthritis and crippling depression. One of the main reasons why the carnivore diet works so well for people with severe health issues is because it acts like the ultimate elimination diet. While the standard carnivore diet can include animal products like chicken, eggs, and dairy, the Lion Diet sticks to only ruminant animals like beef or lamb. While this eliminates the possibility of gut irritation from plant anti-nutrients or chemicals in processed foods, it also eliminates potentially inflammatory compounds that could be found in animal products that we may not be as well equipped to digest. A possible reason why animal products like eggs, for example, could be problematic for some people is that chickens are monogastric animals, so some of what the animal eats can end up in their eggs or flesh, which can then end up in our bodies after we eat them. On the other hand, cows and ruminant animals have multiple chambers in their stomach, which allows them to completely break down any problematic compounds that they consume. Given that there has been such a huge shift to low-fat, high-carb diets, it's no surprise that the modern-day Salisbury steak looks a lot more like this, which basically turned it from a medical food to a comfort food. The key takeaway here is that a diet optimal for healing disease is more about what you don't eat rather than what you do eat. The Salisbury steak's elimination of fiber led to very easy and effortless digestion, while grinding up the meat and ridding the gristle led to even better results, as nearly all of what was being eaten could be absorbed and utilized by the body. With that being said, what you do eat obviously still plays a significant role. Our physiology is perfectly designed to digest fatty meat. This is because not only does it contain high quantities of vitamins and minerals that are essential for us, but it also is absent of anti-nutrients that are found in plants that can further prevent absorption of vitamins and minerals. This is the definition of a highly bioavailable food. But make sure it's not just the flesh, but the associated fat as well, which is where Dr. Salisbury went wrong. From an evolutionary perspective, it doesn't make much sense to avoid fat, not only due to the fact that we know this used to be our primary fuel source, but also from the perspective that we have many organs working in sync like the liver, gallbladder, pancreas, and small intestine. For our physiology, this is extremely energy intensive, meaning our body would not have these mechanisms in place to break down fat if it wasn't extremely important to our survival. And although at the time this diet functioned similarly to a fad diet, as it quickly came and went, it was still based primarily on what humans have eaten for the majority of our time here on this planet. So in that sense, it was one of the farthest things away from a diet fad. So why is fat, specifically saturated fat from animals, so demonized nowadays? Well, a lot of it has to do with this guy right here, Ancel Keys.